Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. Excited to have on Mr. Walt Williams. He's in the green room, and I have a few things I want to catch up with you on. Well, we're live streaming. You've heard me say this before, but I'm just going to do it again for repetition's sake, that live streaming is next generation of broadcasting. You know, they used to say podcasts and podcasts from that device Apple created. That's no longer. We're all shows now. So we're live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter feeds. If you're on there, you can actually chat with us in the studio. I'll be able to see your message. If it's worthy of discussion, we'll put it on the screen. So, hey, just join us, have some fun. This will be produced and released later as an international podcast, as well as a YouTube premiere video. So we got a lot coming at you to support our guest story. A couple announcements that I'd like to make. The show is just extremely popular right now. I don't know. Is that because of me? Probably not. It's all the great guests that are being connected to me. A couple of things I want to announce. One interview coming up September 18th. I'm excited about this because it's Mike Harcourt. For those locals, I'm in Metro Vancouver, British Columbia. Mike was the former mayor of Vancouver, former premier of British Columbia. And if you know his story, he wrote a book called Plan B, and he was sort of knocked out of politics, no pun intended, but he was walking on his deck at his cottage holding 2 buckets of water to fill his hot tub, and the water in the bucket shifted. He fell off his deck. He didn't have a railing, I believe 6 stories into the ocean, face down. They didn't think he'd make it, and he's slightly paralyzed now. He's dedicated his life to helping others with disabilities, still involved in the community. Can't wait till we have a chance to interview him. We have August the 23rd, Mr. Rizwan Abbas. Rizwan is an archeologist, but he's the founder of the Grumatia Society here locally. I didn't know this story, everybody. Now, I'm an Indo-Fijian. I was born on the way here to Canada, but there were 60,000 Indians that were taken through an indentured slavery program from India to Fiji to work on the plantations. They were treated like slaves, put in coolie huts, abused. It was crazy. This story I'm just learning about. Rizwan will come out and he will talk all about that. In fact, it'll be very educational, so look forward to that. Tomorrow on the show, we have Brad Schaefer from Wall Street. He'll talk about the craziness of the old trader floors and how that all worked. Pretty excited. September 17th, Chef Michel. Have you come out? Do you like food? Have you gone to Le Crocodile? One of my favorite French restaurants. A lot of people from around the world come here to the restaurant, including movie stars, by the way. And Michel sold his restaurant after a legacy of creating a career in food. Top chef. He's going to come up and talk to us about what does it take? How do you do that? And when you leave, what do you do with that legacy? And then finally, September 24th, October 1st, we're doing a duo, Dr. Amelia Kelly and Gina Cavalier. They've written a book called Surviving Suicidal Ideation. Isn't that a heavy topic? I thought so. Now, I know a little bit about that. I had a brain injury, and as many of you know, and slipped into depression, and I experienced suicidal ideation. It's crazy unless you know what's going on. These 2 ladies have written an incredible book, and they'll talk about how to navigate through some of that. Hopefully it'll bring in some very interesting education for you. So lots going on the Quiet Warrior Show, everybody. But hey, in this difficult world, the time where the world's craziness, what do we do to make children loved and happy? Well, what if we brought parents together and children together and put them into an experience to color and tell stories? If you like that idea, check this out for a moment. All right, little shameless plug there. My third book, well, that's six. I'm putting up the two hands. That's three. Third book just dropped in May. I'm doing a doctoral degree right now, everyone. I've talked about it. And I had this idea that came through some research and created my first coloring book. There you saw it. Grab it, check it out on Amazon. It uses a Pacific Islander method of communication, both storytelling and bringing children together for creativity. I hope you like that. Well, now, without further ado, let me bring to the screen. He's been patient in the green room. Our guest, welcome, Mr. Walt Williams.
Good morning to you. How are you?
I'm great, Walt. And I just wanted to take a moment to have you on the screen here and just say a few things about your background so our audience can know you, and then we'll get into it. Everyone, I'll put this in the show notes, but Walt sent me some info. I'm just going to pick off some really fascinating facts. You know, this guy likes puns. He likes puns, no pun intended, and he's an archaeologist. So I actually wrote this down to have some fun with you. I was going to say, hey, Walt, I hear you're an archaeologist, too. Does that mean you're always digging up new ideas for your novels? But
Absolutely.
you see, he's polite, right? He would have gotten the old buzzer on that one. A little bit of background on Walt here. He's an information security executive by day, and secret identity is that he's an author. He holds advanced degrees in anthropology, archeology, and is an avid historian, mystic, and poet. Noted for bad puns, we'll test that one out, willing to argue from any perspective. He's endured by his beloved wife, two daughters, lives in Sharon, Massachusetts. When he's not at home or at his computer, he can often be found haunting the various used bookstores of Boston. I think it's notable, Walt, to tell people, and we'll show pictures of this, that you've published. You're the author of 4 books. You can get into that. And you're also frequent panelist at ReaderCon and Aricia. Not everybody knows what does. You can touch on that. And was a panelist at Bosconi in 2018. You've conducted readings from your novels and works in progress with those organizations and other venues. Pretty fantastic stuff. Welcome. And where do you live right now?
I'm still in Sharon, Massachusetts. So I like to refer to it as close to heaven as we'll get on earth. Imagine a community where you can drink the water pumped out of the ground. It's clean, where you can swim in the lake in the center of town. Again, it's clean. There's 2/3 of the town are nature preserve between Moose Hill, which is the oldest Audubon preserve in Massachusetts, the Borderland State Park, which borders between Sharon, Easton, down at the south of the town, and we have 7 synagogues, 7 Christian churches, a mosque. There's so much interfaith dialogue that even though there's no place for the Hindu community to come together on Diwali, they come together at one of the synagogues. All the different congregations share members with each other because of the high amount of interfaith relationships. There's very, very little crime. It's not uncommon for the police blotter to say that, we've had to deal with a raccoon issue as the biggest crime of the week. And that's not to say bad things don't happen here. They're just rather rare. And we're only 30 miles away from Boston and Providence. So we're nestled between 2 of the biggest metropolitan areas in the Northeast. And we have that kind of relaxed community, a place where diversity is celebrated rather than vilified. It's a lovely place to be. It's been our home now for about a quarter century.
Wow, I love that. I love the fact that you've got your roots there, a quarter century. I was chuckling and laughing along with you when you were telling the story there, particularly about the raccoon story, and that's the biggest news. Hey, man, you're talking to a Canadian. Sometimes our American friends poke fun at our media because our biggest news stories might be a raccoon story. Also, I see there's a crate in the background on your background on the floor there. Belongs to a little kitty cat. I'm assuming you have a pet.
Yes, Gwenella, Gwen for short, joined our family about 3 years ago. She's a rescue from a shelter. And we named her after the lead character in my first novel, The Garden at the Roof of the World, which I'm messing up the screen here.
You're just right.
Yeah, the story is about Gwen, who is confronted by a sorceress. Um, she's seeking help to save the life of her brother. And the sorceress is willing to help her on one condition, that she put her own life at risk to help save the life of unicorns. So one's life for another life. In order to do this, Gwen is going to have to travel across Europe and into Asia in search of where the Garden of Eden was hidden at the dawn of time. Because the only thing that will cure this unicorn is fruit from the tree of life. And so the novel is a story of her journey and of five other brave women who traveled with her from many different cultures, many different lands, to try to save the life of the unicorn that walked with Adam and Eve.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's amazing. I always marvel everyone. We're with Walt Williams, who's written 4 books. You just took a glimpse of one. I always marvel, Walt, at the fact that writing a novel, how that can come out of somebody's imagination. I've read many novels, and by the way, they're not small reads. They're like 200, 300 pages, where
Right.
my work's being nonfiction. But let's hold on that story about the books and all for a moment. And I want to take you into what we call Plato's Garden. Are you ready to go into Plato's Garden?
Sure.
Okay.
I like gardens, obviously.
All right. Now, everybody, I'm going to set this up. We'll tidy this up in the editing, but I always have to set it up. There's a little, very brief bumper music. And then I'm going to explain what Plato's Garden is, and it'll guide us through the rest of the conversation today. So, everybody, 3, 2, 1. Ready to go into Plato's Garden? Here we go.
Here we go.
Okay. Should explain that little video there. You know, I was accepted into a doctoral program in Middlesex University, and I wanted to do this segment. I'll explain it in just a moment to you, Walt. And I said, I got to have a bumper. So I cobbled that together literally the day or two after I got my acceptance letter. And that was Canada Day here. So you might have seen me with a little flag on my head. But let's put something up on the screen here. Just let me put that up in a different way. There it is. All right, everybody, there's a picture of what might have been the look of Plato's Garden, maybe Plato Aristotle. So let's give you some definition here. For those on the video, you'll see this. On the pod, you can't see the image, but I'll read it. I know Walt knows most of this. Plato was an Athenian philosopher during the classical period in ancient Greece, founder of Platonist school of thought and the academy, from the word academia. And this was the first institution, apparently, of higher learning in the Western world. Now, one of the things that we're talking about in my educational program is what's called critical thinking. And critical thinking, and I know with Walt's background as an archaeologist, we're talking in critical thinking about connecting the dots, basically. What are the influences of context on Walt's work, his public works? So, Walt, we're going to have conversations that are going to weave through 3 areas. Macro, so what was happening in the world around you that influenced your public works? Public works to me are your books and how you went out in the world, started doing something different than IT. Number 2 is meso. What was happening in your industry or sector that influenced this new direction? And 3 is micro. This is my favorite because it's about what was happening in your personal life that may have influenced your public work. So I'm going to get rid of that off the screen. I'm going to start off with positioning a bit of a big question, and then we'll just tell stories and riff around that. So are you ready?
Yes.
All right. This partially came to me because of something you said to me. So I'm just going to read it. I have a bit of a vision challenge since my concussion, so bear with me. On a personal level, that's micro. You've faced tremendous adversity, yet you've achieved so much across different fields. Walt, when I asked you to write to me about why you felt your story fits the narrative of the hero's journey, which is Joseph Campbell's work, one that involves not just triumphs, but also those gut punches, those dark journeys that ultimately led to a deeper sense of purpose, you wrote to me this: On August 5th, 1986, I should have been decapitated. I have a
Yes.
hole in my spine, damage to bones, tendons, and brain. I'm in constant, often debilitating pain, yet I'm extremely successful in my career. The published author of 5 books, father of 2 wonderful women, and husband to the most amazing woman. How has this experience of enduring profound physical and emotional pain will shape the stories you tell both in novels and in your professional work? Just start anywhere and tell us some stories.
Well, first, I'll start with this thing that you see around my neck.
Mm.
It's I wear it because of that hole that you mentioned. It acts very much like a neck brace. It provides compression and support for the muscles around it, because it hurts right here. It hurts a lot, um, and
Looks like a bandana. So underneath that, right?
yeah, it's made out of silk, so it doesn't damage the skin,
I see.
even on a hot day. And learning to live with pain and knowing that every now and then your brain's just going to be off. You're going to have a day where you're not thinking right because of the damage that was done to the mind that day. Because I hit both the concrete floor here and down here, the steel plate of a table saw. So not only should I have been killed, but I was very, very badly damaged. And I I've learned how to be patient with myself, though every now and then I forget because I want to be more capable than I've become. But I've learned that to look for beauty within the world, to look for joy every single day. And I've woven that kind of openness to being okay with being broken into my stories. Um, mostly the more current ones. Yeah,
Yeah.
try to get this right so
I'm
people
just
can
going to
see
put a
it.
picture on the screen just
Yeah,
so that we can have a bigger image. Hold on.
yeah.
There's all your books, but that's the one. What's the one we're
That
looking?
yeah,
Johnny
that's
Tal.
Johnny Talon and the Goddess of Love and War. Johnny is very, very much a broken person. He's uh, doesn't really work well in his day-to-day life within the world. Uh, he drinks too much, he smokes too much, he's not in good shape, but he has a way of thinking that's unusual, and he uses this to help others. And his particular client is another very broken person. She's a prostitute on the run from a sorcerer who's trying to entrap her. And he's trying to entrap her using the soul of the only person she's ever loved, the soul of her deceased wife. And she's desperate to want to try to rescue that soul from the sorcerer and to keep herself from being entrapped by him. And it's a story about addiction.
Hmm.
Um, if you know anything about Sumerian mythology, the goddess of love and war, Inanna, was a very, very powerful person, very, very powerful goddess. But amongst the things that she introduced to the world beyond prostitution and lots of different fun things about sex was opium. Um, and she's credited in Sumerian mythology with introducing opium as this wonder drug through poppy tea, where you would drink it in order to feel better when you were hurting physically and emotionally. And we all fully know well how harmful opium has become within the world. It's
Yeah.
also the only drug that you can take when you're in pain from cancer. The opium derivatives are the only things that can deal with that level of pain. So everything within the story has that duality, both a positive aspect of it and a problematic aspect of it. And I'm exploring that in detail, very, very deliberately in the story. But I
Yeah.
start out by ripping open the idea that the world is only what we can perceive with the rational mind. One of the problems I've always had, you mentioned Plato earlier. I
Yeah.
much prefer Aristotle.
Oh,
Um,
Tell us why.
who was Plato's student. Aristotle was a bit more open-minded than Plato, who kind of saw the world in black and white.
Yes.
Everything was in dialogue with the ideal of itself, and I'm not too fond of that. I think that the world is much more complicated, much more rich than that. And so I'm very much an Aristotelian in my own thought processes. And I incorporate many of Aristotle's ideas into the exploration of the complexities of what it is to be human, what it is to be
Yes.
within the world. And so um, it's a story of a journey through hell, like any addiction story is. But you don't go into hell alone, even when you're an addict.
Yeah.
You can go in with a guide. In this case, the story of the journey through hell is told from the perspective of the guide. Now, for anyone who's gone through addiction, um, you know full well that the guide who's helping you is helping you on your journey, something that you're going to discover together. And so he doesn't know where he's going. He only knows what he hopes the outcome will be. And so the story, while fun, and it's very fun. It's surreal. It's filled with lots of wry humor, but it's got at its core this guided journey through the hell of addiction to try to get back to who you are within the world, and that it's okay to be broken. That's
I
not
love that.
something, yeah,
Yeah.
that's not something to shy away from.
No, I love that. I love that whole concept of being broken. I have a lot of things I want to riff with you because this is
Mm,
storytelling. We're not talking heads here. But first, I want to just put something on screen. We got some people watching us live. That's pretty cool.
mm.
There's a comment there from Derek Dombeck on LinkedIn. Derek's on LinkedIn, everyone. It's on the screen. You can't see it on the podcast, but he says, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a harder battle." Thank you, Derek,
Absolutely.
for Thank you for chiming in, Derek. That'll be indelibly marked in the show. Fantastic. Everybody, we're live streaming, so if you are on, make a comment, chat with us so you can hear Walt's conversation back to you. Walt, just a whole bunch of things came to my mind, and you're such a good storyteller.
Thank you.
One of them, the word addiction, I have so much respect for that topic. My father, I mentioned to you, my father, maybe I didn't, but my father passed away in 2018.
Hmm.
When he died, he was 23 years with Alcoholics Anonymous. And my dad left home when I was young. I had no dad from the age of 12. Very violent man, drank all the time. I saw things no child should see, and I experienced things physically and mentally the same. And that shaped my work. That's why I do what I do, bringing stories. One of the things I also take note in is my work through mental health as an advocate crossed over into this area of drug addiction, opioids and things like that. Last story on that I want to tell you is I had a good friend who basically had a car accident. The car landed on top of him,
Ah,
hurt himself pretty bad, and they put him on OxyContin or some of these
hmm.
drugs. My goodness. And there's so much now out there, right? Documentaries about how the addictive drugs can be. I
Yes.
wanted to ask you just to go back into the story and just clarify some things. When so in the daytime, you're an IT executive, you transition into this writing. Did that happen in the macro world and maybe crossing into that meso sector? Did this passion to start writing happen after your accident? And also, you said you hit a table saw, so it sounds like you fell.
Yes.
And was that doing something personally? Because I wouldn't think in the IT field you're using a table saw.
No, no. Thankfully, table saws are not used in information security. I, I was about to pursue a PhD in anthropology. I was working my way through a summer job in a maintenance shop, and the idiots who ran the place had stacked the wood vertically, not horizontally, and told me that I needed to help move the stack. And I told them it wasn't safe. They said, "Do it."
Oh my God.
And I had a choice. I could walk
Yeah.
away, lose the job, or hopefully they were right and we could move this safely. Um, because my father worked at the factory, if I made a scene here, it was not just going to impact me, it was going to impact him in his position. I'd come across as the so very, very privileged son of this executive in this firm who won't do manual labor. Shame on him.
Wow.
And so, sometimes you have to take risks.
Absolutely. And
And
you don't
this
want a nepotism that in anything.
exactly.
How old were you?
Exactly. I was 18, sorry, 19.
Goodness.
And so tried to move the wood, and it was about a half a ton of plywood, and it fell down on me. It hit me from the neck down, pinning me to the concrete floor. Um, and on the way backwards to the concrete, I clipped the back of a table saw, and the table of the table saw bent in two instead of taking my head off my body. So
Wow.
I got very, very lucky when they pulled the wood off of me. I went into shock. I was taken to the hospital. I have spinal damage. I have damage to my hip, to my legs, to my arms, and of course the hole in my neck that
Yeah.
is just a pain in the neck, if you will. And
there. Okay. There you. We'll give you a little bit of applause there. The bad puns. We're just seeing the beginning of it. I want to first of all say first of all honor you for sharing the depth of that story. I didn't know the depth of it, but that is going back to age 18. That man is incredible. God bless you that God spared you that day.
the month after this happened to me, I met the woman who is now my wife of 33 years
Amazing.
while in graduate school. When she first met me, I was leaning over a walker, and she thought I was this nice older man. My beard was I had a beard then, but it was
At
dark.
18, I'm laughing.
And yeah, no, she thought I was an older man because it took
Yeah.
me a while before I could walk without a cane. I can do so most of the time now. Sometimes I still need the cane. Um, it was a long road to recovery, but throughout the entire time, I was always writing. But most of what I was writing was poetry. And I've
Uh,
been writing poetry since I was 12. The only story I was working on at the time was an epic poem. When we had kids, there came a point where my eldest daughter said, "Dad, don't read me a story. Make up a story. Tell me one of your stories." I was like, okay. And I started to create stories for her. And one of those stories became um, the garden at the
we're
roof
just
of the
going to full
world.
screen you there so you can
Yeah,
see that.
and yeah. Let me hold it like this. So as
Thank
I
you.
was creating this story for her, I was realizing that this was a story for adults, not for kids.
Read the
Because if
title
you,
out again there so the audience can
yeah,
hear it.
the garden at the roof of the world.
Thank you.
Um, while I was initially creating it for my daughter, who was I think 8 at the time,
What's her name?
uh, Kayla.
Nice.
Um, she this was a story for adults, not for kids. Because if you know anything about the myth of the unicorn, in order to be with a unicorn, you have to be a virgin. So if I'm going to have people travel across half the world, they're going to have to deal with the conflicts of staying virginal or staying pure within the world. And that's not exactly a story for little kids. And so I wrote the story for adults. I entered it into, at the time, Amazon was having a contest for emerging novelists, and I won a semifinalist in the Amazon Breakthrough Novel contest. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And uh, Dragonwell Publishing picked it up, and it's now been in print for about 11 years. It continues to sell nicely, and there's January Hills is um, uh, movies producers group, a group of movie producers that have a contract with me. They're shopping this around Hollywood. They intend to make a TV series out of it, a 3-season TV series out of it, which will be a lot of fun. And I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to that happening.
Yeah, I just want to jump in there and just support you. Everybody, we've put on the screen, you can't see it if you're on podcast, but the 5 books there. So, Johnny, just for the sake of this podcast, you've got The Garden at the Roof of the World. Security for Service-Oriented Architectures, the latest, Johnny Talon and the Goddess of Love and War,
Yep.
the unicorn one, and then creating an information security program from scratch, which is not something I would read before bed unless I want to go to sleep.
Yes, no, that will put you to sleep in a heartbeat. Um, that book was my COVID project.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
Okay,
uh,
cool.
it's my second information security book. The first one, creating a security for service-oriented architectures, was brought out about the same year that The Garden at the Roof of the World came out, and
Wonderful.
it sold well enough that CRC Press asked me to write another book,
Yeah,
and gave me free reign as to what I would write about. And so many people within the world know that they have to create information security program, but have no idea how to start and what goes into making it successful. And I've had the distinct pleasure of running a successful information security program. I should knock on wood someplace or something, but we've never had a ransomware infection. We've never had a data breach in any of the companies I've run the information security program for.
that's
Um,
amazing. I just want
and,
to jump in there, Walt, if you don't mind, just because there's so many threads coming out of this.
yes.
Walt's holding the book up there. Just read the title.
Creating an information security program from scratch. It's
Oh,
Andy Ellis referred to it as the Wikipedia of information security. It attempts to be very, very comprehensive, but because of that, it's a little shallow.
yeah,
It gives you a very, very broad introduction to the field, and then you can go from there to explore the depths of each one of the chapters. Could lead you to many different books. And so it has the extensive bibliography to help you go
yeah.
from there to someplace else. It's not designed as a place to stop. It's a place to start in your journey to
I
create an
see.
information security program.
Let me just jump in there. Everybody, we're with Walt Williams. Walt's written 5 books. We're talking today about so many things. We're in Plato's Garden, actually, just connecting all the dots between what was going on in the macro world, in his sector where he works, and in his personal life as he created this, what I call public agency. So many things that are going through my mind. I'm just going to throw up on you. This is a storytelling back and forth, and to see if it evokes some things when you get talk back to me. I'm just going to read something I had on my paper here. I had this question, and then I'll build on it. In Plato's Garden, we often explore the connections between different areas of life. How do you see the threads of knowledge from your work in information security, your study of history, and your personal experiences weaving together to shape your worldview? Just park that in your mind for a minute, Walt. I'm fascinated by people like yourself because I'll be honest with you. My background's being an executive, was a chief executive officer, and I had an IT VP and a department of amazing, talented people. We sold software as well in the company. It was financial services software. But I could never keep up. I would sit in a boardroom and guys would start talking and my brain locks up. I'm just not wired. And what's fascinating to me, and I wrote this down on the paper, so far, the hero's journey story I'm putting together here about you, the great Walt, you told us some little nuggets. One is you talked about writing poetry in your early years, age 12 or so. And I
Still
was
do.
asking, and you still do. And what's interesting is they say people always have a dream or a passion or something that comes from earlier life, but they don't always follow that passion and turn it into something. Well, the sad day happened at age 18, the horrible accident. And by the way, we have to honor your wonderful wife who came into your life and said, I want you, despite how horribly injured you were. But then you told us you started writing through recovery, which is fascinating to me.
Mhm.
So the question that came to mind through that was, when you were talking about opioids and things like that, are there parts of your book that, in other words, do you have to, in your life, portray those stories before you write about them, or can you, through your imagination, fictionalize the stories? Obviously, the deeper question is, did you, through the pain you had, get addicted to any kind of medications, or did you see that as something that was possible, and therefore you started writing about that journey that maybe you experienced through somebody alongside?
Much like your father was an alcoholic, um, my grandmother and my grandfather were. And my grandfather was also addicted to gambling. So my father lost his dad when he was 10, where his dad just disappeared one day.
Wow.
Um, and my grandmother, in a fit of alcoholic rage, once threw him out of the house. And he, um, imagine being thrown out of the house and you're 10 years old. He was able to find his way over to a relative where he stayed for a while until things calmed down.
Yeah.
And you never quite knew what you were going to get out of my grandmother. Um, and so I watched and learned from him and from his situation how uh, things like alcohol, cigarettes, harder drugs, etc., are traps.
Mm.
I can remember one day at a information security conference, I had a glass of a Mai Tai. Delicious, I love it. And all of a sudden, the pain was gone. And then about 20 minutes later, the pain was back.
Mm.
And I cried so much in realizing this is a trap. If I pursue that method of getting around my pain, it works for just such a brief period of time. Then the pain
Yeah.
always comes rushing back. I'd have to do it again and again. And each time it would take more and more and more to get the pain to go away. And that's how people get pulled into these things. And it
Yes.
doesn't always have to be physical pain. Sometimes it can be emotional pain. And sometimes the substances that you try to help you deal with the pain are instantly addicting, like a heroin. And sometimes they take longer. But
Yeah.
regardless, I saw this trap, and I
Yeah.
so longed for that moment of being pain free.
Thank you.
And then I went and I called my wife and I talked to her about it. And I never forgot that. And that that pain of discovering um, went into Johnny Talon and the Goddess of Love and War, where she, not Johnny Talon, but the client he's helping, who gives the pseudonym Eve when she first meets him.
Yes.
Of course, she's trying to hide who she is. She's ashamed of who she is. And part of what she's ashamed at is her addictions. Part of what she's ashamed of is that she's used sex as a way of having an income. And showing her growth to become okay with who she is within the world, even as somebody who has gone through all of that hell, that it's okay for her to be her within the world, was such an important story for me to tell.
I.
And and you
Yeah.
don't tell and you don't tell something that heavy unless you want to get very heavy,
Yeah.
or you want people to enjoy it, because so I wrapped the story in a lot of humor. One of the things I learned from my dad early on is how you can have all of this pain,
Yes.
but deal with it with uh, a joy of life and a sense of humor, making fun of the problem really helps the problem be more bearable. And so
Absolutely.
that's a lesson I took from him early on. And so the story, while it's a journey through hell, it's a light-hearted romp uh, that Kirkus reviews called kooky, and it is kooky.
It's a
Uh,
cookie cutter. It's a cookie cutter book.
yeah,
Your dad. We were talking a little bit before off in the green room. Your father, he's not with you anymore, correct? Or
no, I lost him about 7 years ago.
yeah,
I miss him every day of my life. I wish to God I could share with him creating an information security program from scratch, which came out after he died, or the Johnny
yeah,
Talon and the Goddess of Love and War, which came out after he died. He
yeah,
got a chance to read The Garden to the Roof of the World, but and he loved it, and that was great. But
Was he a
uh,
writer? Was he a writer
he
too?
he wrote, but he wrote very different than I write.
Mm.
He he had a vocational calling to be a deacon in the Roman Catholic Church, and so most of what he wrote were homilies. When he was younger, he wrote some poetry, but that was never his calling.
Yeah,
He was a very, very visual person, and so
yeah.
my mother's house, you can see many of his drawings, some of his paintings on the walls, and his dad also was a brilliant artist.
Well, I'm just going to connect the dots, everybody. We're with Walt Williams, author of 5 books. He's talking to us about so many things today. I was going back to, first of all, again, honoring you for so hard to repeat painful stories. This new thread that came in. See, everybody, what's happening here is, and you may be starting to feel this, is when you're storytelling, the more we hear from Walt, his story, the more we learn about ourselves. Walt, I just love you and your story. The thing that's happening to
Thank you.
me is I'm growing here through things you're saying. As an example, you talked about your grandfather and grandmother. Now, by the way, everybody, if I just sat here as a talking head and said, tell us about your books, none of this would come out. That's why my show is highly rated and award winning, because we bring in story. So one of the things that I started experiencing when you talk about your grandparents being addicted is that's my father was, as I mentioned, but my
Hmm.
grandfather was, who I never met. And so I started hearing through you. You were observing, and you took a path in life by learning lessons at an early age of what that might look like. The other part about gambling, so many challenges that you saw around you. It sounds to me like at a young age, because I never had my grandfather around me, but it sounds like you had access to your grandparents, like you were within a close vicinity, right?
Um, Not so close after a point. The
I see.
grandparents I'm talking about, they relocated to Florida, and so we got to talk to them a few times a year, and it always had to be early in the day before they started drinking. Otherwise, you were dealing with a mess.
I see.
Or we got to see them the rare times we were able to go down to visit,
Yeah.
and visits were deliberately kept rare because my dad didn't want his kids to go through the hell that he went through. And so he worked very hard to keep um, us aware of what was going on,
Yeah.
but to insulate us from the problems of what was going on. And he
So
did a wonderful job. He was a great dad. I
that
love him so
you
much. I miss him.
it's so obvious. If you everybody, if you're watching the video, you can see the change in the body language inflection of Walt when he's talking about his dad. You know, I did my dad's eulogy because I have 2 brothers who didn't want to. They were so angry with him. 3 months before my dad passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. That was 2018. I was estranged from him most of my life, and I was born and raised baptized Catholic. I had my faith, which I denied. I was angry, and because of what happened to me through his behavior. What's interesting is something called on me, and I believe it was prayer, and it was somebody else in my life who I was connecting with at the time, where I went and saw my dad for coffee, and there was this exchange of forgiveness over coffee. He said, "Son, I love you. I release you." And I remember asking him, "Tell me about grandfather." And when I listened, it's like, oh my God, it was such a horrible experience to hear my dad talk about his dad, who was an alcoholic, who was a violent man. You know, my dad learned to swim, he told me, in Fiji by being pushed off a bridge. Imagine the toughness, the trauma. My dad was a commanding officer in the military. And so he brought all that. It shaped him, Walt. And that's why I think your story's fascinating, because here's your father, who we just learned some things about him. Thank you. Who, despite his life and the experiences he had, you're shaped by the experiences around you, and there
You
you
are.
have him. And I now, when people ask me about my dad, I never used to be able to say it. I say I love my dad. I say that a lot, and so feeling that for you is such a gift, because clearly, your dad shaped you. Where do you think your resilience came from? Look, I'll be honest with you. I just went through an accident myself that's nowhere near what you went through. But if you know my story, others do or don't. I was doing a ride to conquer cancer. It's 225 kilometers on a bicycle, and they do it annually here in British Columbia. And I was actually writing for a fellow who lost his 10-year-old daughter 10 years ago that day to leukemia. And there's a thread. Your dad had, I think you told me something about leukemia. Anyway,
Yes.
Walt, just quickly on the story, the rides of 225 kilometers, I trained hard, I borrowed a bicycle, I didn't even have one. This was 2018. Finished the first half of it, go to have a shower. I fell backwards in the bathtub, and the full force of my body cracked a hole in the tub with my head and sustained a brain injury. Now, I hit the back of my head here, which is the vision center, so I have permanent photophobia. I can't filter light, so I'm struggling sitting here with my light. I have double vision, so if I look down on my paper and up at you, the convergence of my eyes don't come together fast. So, you know, my brain works hard. I'm here. I love my life that I'm still here. I went through that, and then I slipped into depression in the first 3 months after, because my whole life stopped. I couldn't walk straight. I couldn't speak properly. All of that over the last 5 years through therapy, neuroplasticity, I've improved. This is the thing that I'm so amazed with your story, man, that here you are and you told us about the pain and what happened. And you're an incredible guy. Look at the books you're writing, the stories you're sharing, this change others' lives, and the aura around you when you're talking to me. Now, I know that every day, and I'll give it back to you in a moment on this, I know every day is a struggle. And you talked about something very important. My father was an alcoholic, so when I was going through my tough times, I had suicidal ideation 3 months into my depression. I started drinking, and this feels good. But then I realized, especially with psychiatry help, that the next day I felt even more depressed. And
Yes.
those neuromodulators, the brain chemicals, would come out and make me feel good, but then they're gone. And even today I have some pain that happens because my neck, when I move it, I have these issues. Nothing like yours. That there are days where I just pray. I'm a man of faith. I've learned to use my faith. I just pray, you know, keep me going. But what do I do to get through my pain and my struggles? I write. I produce my podcast. I'm a coach of others for coming from business. And I find joy and happiness in the world around me, but serving. So I know I threw up on you, but this was the idea. You evoked in me that I feel better about myself and my life after talking to you, because there's been times where I thought, what a loser you are. You're a shell of the guy you used to be. But holy cow. So everybody, here we have Walt, such great gifts that he's giving us. Walt, take it back from us and tell us just one more thing about the book, Hold It Up, Johnny Talon.
Sure.
The one thing about the book you talked about was, thank you, very deep book, but you used humor, a lot of humor.
Yes.
And so I'll tease you on this, that I learned this through my recovery of my brain, that especially storytelling, you know storytelling better than anybody. But I didn't know this until I learned it, that if you are too heavy in writing or too heavy, like if you watch movies that are too heavy, some people are on the edge of their seat for too long. The sympathetic nervous system in the brain turns on, basically putting you on high alert because there's
Yes.
danger. And we're not meant to stay in that state for long. We can't handle it. So some people can't even continue. But if you bring in humor, it allows you to breathe and release some other chemicals, and then you want to go deeper. Just give us some teasers from the book about the humor. So an example of this part of the story, how you did that, so we can get people getting the book to read it.
The story is, I use a voice, first person narrative. So it's all being told through Johnny Talon's perspective. And Johnny's kind of this jaded, sarcastic guy who reacts to the world knowing full well that it's not rational. And so he's constantly questioning everything that he's perceiving, but he's also making quips about it. Um, and um, some of these quips are a way of showing his perspective, and sometimes it's a way of showing his experience. One scene that comes to mind, he has to take the only evidence he has of what's going on with his client to a forensics lab to have the blood on her dress checked out to see if they can track down who's the guy who attacked her. And while he's getting the dress to this forensics specialist, so many things are changing in a way that's driving him a little bit nuts. When he goes to his car, it's always a different car. Every time that he looks at his client, she's wearing different clothing. So he's wondering, as he's going to get to the office, is the dress still going to be a dress? And he goes into the office worrying, will the dress still be a dress? He opens up the door, and his first response is, and unfortunately, Gladys is still Gladys. And Gladys is the girl behind the reception desk who he's got to deal with, who's an ex-girlfriend of his that he had a complicated situation with. And that's just an example of his humor in the story that comes to mind. And it's such a delightful way of relieving the tension of being in a world where you can't tell what something is just by looking at it.
Yeah.
Your perceptions of reality are not reliable. You can't trust your mind, so you have to always be kind of questioning what is reality here. And I do that very deliberate, and that moment relieves that tension, and it gives you a chance to also explore the dynamic of the dialogue between Gladys and Johnny, who doesn't want to take his check because his checks always bounced.
Yeah.
And you actually have the money this time, Johnny? Imagine that. Maybe you're growing up a little bit. Oh, and who's the super bitch that you're with right now? As Gladys talks about his client Eve, who's just kind of glaring at Gladys and Gladys's judgment of Eve.
That's amazing.
And
Yeah.
it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun to write.
How long did it take you to write that book, the new one?
It took me about 5 years to write Johnny Talon, the Goddess of Love and War.
Wow.
And it was at points a difficult thing to write because I want to write about difficult things but make them light so that they're bearable. And that was hard to do sometimes. And also because my day job, when you're an information security executive, you don't exactly have a lot of free time in your day.
I gathered. Do you go to an office or do you work out of a home office?
Most days I work from right where you see me right now. This is my
perfect.
home office. Though I do have an office where I go into about once a week. Thankfully, not today. And where I
Is
can
it your own
sit and do the
company? Is
stuff.
it your own company, or are you working for some?
Now, I'm working for a prominent New England firm
Okay.
that's been in business for well over 100 years, and I really don't want to talk about because they're a great firm, but this has got nothing to do with them. And I really, really try hard to keep the day job and the
Yeah, I respect that. Yeah.
yeah.
It's funny. Well, we could probably cover you back in to talk about information security. It's one of the things why I brought that up, tongue in cheek, about being a guy who gets confused about IT. Like, look, my mom's 88, and you, like, a lot of people don't understand the jargon, the terminology, information security.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things, one of the things that came out of just what you said and what you're doing in the writing is you're writing in a way to have people do critical thinking, connecting the dots. Like you said, you like Aristotle's way of thinking. Don't take it at face value. That's brilliant perspective. What's troubling me about the world, but we're not going to get into it, so I'm just saying this to riff on Plant a Seed. What's troubling about the world is, especially with all these cyber attacks and all this fake news and stuff we hear about, where you just don't know anymore. And in my doctoral, I'm actually looking at media. So your interview will be a blessed part of my thesis, inform me. But it's like, how do you know fact, fiction, opinion? And one of the things I'd like to do more of is educate myself. We just had a major cybersecurity issue here locally with a company called London Drugs. And it took down all of their stores. This is a massive thing. And it ended up, the ransom was massive. So I think we're in a day and age where people need to educate themselves. I come from the world of business as a chief executive. I got to be honest with you, even sitting with you now, I feel a little, not ashamed, but a little bit like I should have taken seriously the technology education and learned, especially as a high executive, because in today's world you have to understand some of these issues. So let's park that, but I wouldn't mind having another conversation with you about that.
Yeah, no, it's a difficult thing in the business world where you need to take risks in order to
Yes,
grow the business,
exactly,
but you have to understand the risks you're taking,
for
and
sure.
so ideally you have somebody like me on your staff who can help you um, ensure that the risks you're taking in running the business are sustainable.
Yeah.
um, and that's a hard balance to take, and that gets into a good part of what I get into here in this book. It's all about
Yeah, everybody,
understanding risk management.
everyone, Walt held it up. If you're on podcast, you couldn't quite see it. Obviously, the book that he held up, one of his five, is creating an information security program from scratch.
Yeah.
I think I would recommend any of these books, particularly that one to learn. I was just thinking with your bad puns, I came up with this other one in my head, probably so stupid, but you were talking about IT, and my brain just goes in different quadrants. So I thought about it, and I thought about that clown and Steven's Stephen. So
Yes.
maybe your next book is it with a big clown on the cover, the IT guy, it. uh,
No, IT is certainly a horror show. That's for certain. Um,
Thank you. Let me
what?
just take you on a different journey because we're moving to the
Yes.
end of close to an hour here. I want to honor you and have you talk about this because it's notable. In your bio, it says he's frequently author panelist at ReaderCon,
Hmm.
Aricia, and there was
BossCon.
something. Yes. Can you just, because we can't assume everybody understands what the heck all that is. Just talk about that because I'm fascinated by that.
Um, ReaderCon, BossCon, and Arisia are three conferences that are held in the Boston metropolitan area. Arisia is held every January, BossCon every February, and ReaderCon every July. And what they are is an opportunity for a group of people who love literature, who love media, to come together to share their love with each other. And so I'll go and I'll read from my unicorn book or I'll read from one of my novels, but I'll get a chance to meet other authors. I'll get a chance to meet people who are making movies. I'll get a chance to meet people who draw comic books. I'll get a chance to meet people from the theater world who do costuming, who put on plays, who teach people how to do dances. So they're wonderful, wonderful communities. ReaderCon is my favorite of the three because it's so focused in on literature, and that's where my deepest love is literature. But Arisi is a lot of fun, as is BossCon, and they have wonderful guests of honor. This coming year, Jasper Ford, the prominent novelist, is going to be BossCon's guest of honor, and I hope to again be a panelist at BossCon. And they have helped me in my journey to become a successful author. So I've read from The Garden to the Roof of the World. I've read from The Reality, Mythology, and Fantasy of Unicorns, which we haven't talked about. And I've read from Johnny Talon and the Goddess of Love and War at these conferences. Thankfully, they've never asked me to read from the information security books, and I'm very, very blessed about that.
I have an idea. They should do that when everybody's left and the roadies are taking down the stage. You should be
Mm.
up there reading that book.
Oh,
hey,
no, no. Nobody wants that.
hey, Walt, you did give us a thread about your father and something about being a deacon. Was he
Yes.
actually in the church? And did anything throughout your writings bring in anything about faith?
Absolutely, yes. My father was a deacon, the first ordained deacon in the Diocese of Rockville Center in New York. And he got his vocation from a tragedy that I haven't talked about. My sister died at 5 months from SIDS.
Oh
And
my.
my father got very angry at God and in his prayer yelled at God, "How could you permit this sort of thing to happen?" And like I am, my dad was a mystic, and in his prayer, got back the challenge: "What are you going to do about it?" And my dad's response was, "No one should have to live in a world where this kind of horrible thing can happen to you without support, without help.
Mm.
That the role of us within the world is to help each other through such things, because that death didn't come from God. That death came from something physiologically wrong with my sister
Mm.
that is beyond comprehension. But the pain of her loss was so real that he eventually became a deacon and lived his life trying to help people um, learn how to deal with the wrong within the world so that they could live with a sense of peace and love rather than just hurt and pain and sorrow. And I am not exactly orthodox in my practice of Roman Catholicism,
Mm.
as my very Jewish wife will tell you. But I find the fundamental aspects of the Roman Church to be so profoundly challenging. And I find the teachings of Jesus to be profoundly challenging. Nonviolence, response to violence. Love your enemies, not just love your neighbors, love your enemies. That's so worthwhile hearing in this day and age where we treat our neighbors sometimes as our enemies
Yes.
in this highly polarized society. And so, putting aside questions of was Jesus God within the world, just listen to his teachings and pay attention to, okay, if you're going to love your enemy, what do you do about that? How would you respond to that? If the right response to violence is nonviolence, how can you move forward within the world? Those are deep things to think about. And so both The Garden at the Roof of the World and Johnny Talon and Goddess of Love and War look at such deep issues.
Yeah.
In The Garden at the Roof of the World, it's set in the 13th century when the only kind of Christianity was either Orthodox or Roman Catholic. This was before Protestantism existed. Sorry, also my mistake, the Coptic Church, which is a form of Orthodoxy. And but Gwenella, as she goes throughout the story, is encountering people who are Jewish, people who are Hindu, people who are Buddhist, people who are Muslim, all of whom have a shared love of unicorns and a shared desire to help this unicorn and achieve restoration of health for this unicorn.
Yeah.
So the story, The Garden at the Roof of the World, is a way of exploring the many, many paths to God that we all have and how we all have things that we share in common. And so it's a dialogue with the different faiths within the world to look for what we have in common with each other.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Johnny Talon and the Goddess of Love and War. Pay attention to that title for a second. The
Mhm.
Goddess of Love and War. What, who are we to say that if we're Christian, that Jesus was the only part of God that ever became incarnate? Uh,
Mm.
if you read carefully Genesis, Abraham welcomed to his tent men who he said was the Most High come to him. If you read any of the stories of Krishna, any of the stories of the Buddha, they talk about God becoming within the world.
Yeah.
Well, what if one of the creatures that um, opposed God in the dawn of time decided that I want to restore my relationship with God, and I'm going to follow Jesus's path and become a person and live within the world? And that goddess was the Goddess of Love and War, Inanna. What would her life be like? And so I'm taking a dialogue between Roman Catholicism and a very ancient form of paganism. and poking at Roman Catholicism with, you have an unhealthy relationship with human sexuality here. Let's explore that critically, shall we? And so while I talked about it as a story of addiction, there are other layers through my own faith where you can explore it very, very differently, as
That
a
sounds
critical.
that book sounds like a fascinating book. What just quickly, what year did you write that one?
This book came out this past February. So I wrote
Yeah,
this the prior 5 years. So that would be from about 2018 through
yeah.
2023.
Everybody, I'm going to do a shout out. This is a good time for me to plug what we're with Walt Williams, as you know, he's author of 5 books. Johnny Talon and the Goddess of Love and War, the latest. Listen, authors' work don't get known, everyone. I'm an author published unless we read their work, unless we do the next step, which is go to Amazon or go to goodreads.com, wherever the author hangs out, and post a review. Write what you felt and liked about the book.
Oh,
That
please,
exactly.
please.
Uh, but you got me going on again. This is probably an interview part 2, but you got me going again. Thank you for the blessing of that talk about. We started talking about your father, who the deacon story, and that led into you talking about how you brought some of this learning of your own into your works. I told Walt a little bit in here, everyone, about my story, but the part I didn't really talk about is this. I'm holding it up here. This is the Bible. This is one of my go-tos, and I'm just going to say something that might be controversial to some, but I come from a broken home and an addicted father and a pretty horrible upbringing. Turned out pretty good, in my opinion. I did. And my father recovered, made peace before he died. But when I grew up, what I saw in my home up until the age 12 or so didn't teach me what the Bible has taught me. How do you love people? How do you walk alongside people that maybe you hate? How do you feel good about yourself? How do you forgive? And when I had my brain injury, Walt, I asked my wife to buy me a cross. I wear it every day. And I would go to Costco at night stocking boxes of heavy produce because I couldn't work, so doing physical work. I was a mess. And I used to, in the car, just have conversations, say, God, just help me. I'll stay at Costco as long as I have to, but give me a sign. I don't know how to deal with this. And throughout my life, since 2018, and then the death of my father and all that, so many things I've learned just from understanding the teachings or the word of the Bible. And so I'm not here to convert people or make this into a religious show. The one thing I do want to say is I don't like the word religion. To me, my faith is about a personal relationship with one person, that's Jesus Christ. And when I read this Bible, the books in it just tell me through the eyes of others and him, sort of how do you navigate the world if you believe in that. And it's a personal relationship. It's saved many parts of my life. And also, Walt, I talk about it now more than I ever have, and I never used to talk about that subject. Well, listen, we're towards the end here. And I have a couple things I want to honor you with, and then we'll give you the last word. It's been such a fun interview. I didn't expect it would be so amazing. I thought it would be talking about books and things, but you took us on journeys that have blessed us. So first of all, I'm going to honor you with some words here. What I do is I have a piece of paper, and as you're talking, I script these words. They're leadership words, and what I would in part define Walt as. The first one is creative. Man, you're a creative guy, especially most people can't write one book, but the creativity in your mind, amazing. 2, resilient. You know why. We've heard your story. We can't imagine what you've gone through, but you are resilient. 3, I use the word maven. Now, if you've read the book Outliers, anyone, the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, he says there's if you find people in the world who are mavens or connectors, they have either of these two. These are people you want to know. A maven is somebody that you go, if I want to know something about information security, oh yeah, I'm going to go to that guy, Walt. So in my mind, you're a maven in so many ways, particularly that. And the last one is love. Don't see a smile as much from you. You're a serious guy, but there it is. And when you have this humor, but throughout the whole interview, that comes out of you, love. And you know how you do it. And I just want you to know that I see it in you. And never
Thank you.
stop. It's a blessing. And finally, we're going to give you an award today. So just hold on. I got to grab this off my studio shelf. I don't know if you knew you were going to get an award, but here it is. So I'm just going to hold something up on screen, everyone. So this is a challenge coin. Do you know what a challenge coin is?
I certainly do. We use them in information security all the time.
Oh, he's got one. He's holding it up. Look at that, dueling coins. Okay, so now I'm even more excited because somebody knows what it is. I don't have to throw up and tell you, but I will for the audience. In World War I, the story of these originated, and they were coins that soldiers carried in their pockets to commit community. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't have yours, maybe you bought drinks or whatever. But they're used around the world. Even in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, they had their own version of coins. So the front of the coin, they're hand-painted and crafted in the U.S. The front is the image of the Quiet Warrior show with some keywords. But the back, my favorite part of it is the hero's journey narrative is fully illustrated. And that is the journey that one might take in life. And so congratulations, you're now a Quiet Warrior. We have around the world people in that community.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Authentic but fake applause there for you.
There's nothing like authentically fake applause. You know, you don't get better than that.
Well, it could get worse. The last time I did this, because I have this vision thing sometimes, I went to hit the applause button and I did this.
So that sounds a bit more perfect for me, but yeah.
That may be more of what you are, my friend. But by the way, this is fascinating to me. I have a dashboard in the studio. You can't see it, but it tells me the number of people who are live watching. And usually you get to the end of an hour, and it's diminishing. It's climbed. It's tripled. We have more people on now.
Hey, good. Go you.
Everybody, if you are on in the last 30 seconds or so, you can post a comment in your chat. It'll come up in the studio here. I'll try to pop it on screen just for the honoring of this story. But on that note, I want to give it back to you. Tell us where people can get a hold of you, your books, anything at all. And tell us this, that based on all the insights from your IT services or IT security career, the authorship, the injury, all the stuff you've been through, when you're done with this world, how do you want the world to look?
Oh, I'm hoping when I'm done with this world that the world will be a slightly kinder, gentler place to people who are different than you. Whoever posted up in your chat earlier that when you look at somebody, you don't know the challenges they're going through, you don't know the journey they're going through. That's so very real. Everybody you meet is fighting a harder battle than you can possibly imagine. Please be open to that. Listen to each other. Ask questions. Live critically of yourself. How can you be better within the world? The better you within the world. Because you're the only you that's ever going to exist. So learn how to be authentically you. If everybody can start doing that, the world will become a better place. Because all too often we're afraid to show the world who we are because we're afraid that people reject us, people won't love us. And quite the opposite. People will value you for who you are, not for who they thought you were within the world. And that is so wonderful.
It is one. Oops, I lost myself on my mic here. It is. I'm making mental notes here. Everybody, teaching moments. What Walt just told us. Go back and listen to it and take note of it. It's interesting because again, every time you talk, it has a thread in my mind somewhere. In the doctoral I'm doing, I'm in year 2. Hopefully, graduate in July next year. And your interview is really helping me. One of the themes I'm looking at. So I'm basically critiquing my public works, and the university has helped me. And one of the themes I'm looking at is masks and identity, and this whole concept of who are we? Are we really who we say we are? I'm just going to play with you here and put this over.
Awesome.
I actually have 4 masks, and I started even before I started my education program just when I was injured, like you said I started writing when I was COVID times or whatever. I had this fascination, and I had a mask made by a Hollywood mask maker who worked with me, depicting the 4 types of things that we see in me. And so this whole idea, I wrote it down on my paper. Walt told us this, that great last piece, but I wrote this down too. It's okay for you to be you. That is amazing. Should be a T-shirt on that or a mug or something. It's okay to be you. So on that note, I want to thank you for being you, Walt, and you're welcome. And everyone, find that true passion like you're seeing in Walt's public works, and find that life that you deserve and live the life that you desire. And we'll see you again on the Quiet Warrior Show. Walt, have you back again. It's been amazing.
Tom, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca.